2 years ago, I wrote and self-published a book, this book, a non-fiction career guide for artists, which has sold about 4,000 copies so far. It was a finalist for the 2024 UK Business Book Awards, and it's almost been an Amazon bestseller in its category. It's got up to like position 2. Maybe I'll get there one day. Aside from writing the damn thing, there's a lot to learn if you want to self-publish a book. So I'm going to break it all down here with the steps, costs, and all the things I had to do and learn during the process. I learned how to do it from all kinds of different places, so I'll direct you to resources throughout the video, which will all be listed in the description too. I've added chapters so you can dip into the different stages when you need them. First of all, why write a book in the first place? Writing a book wasn't something that had ever crossed my mind before a few years ago. I was never very good at writing or languages. Honestly, I still couldn't confidently tell you the difference between a verb and an adjective without looking it up. But starting this YouTube channel and posting 100 or so videos before the book was launched meant I had to write a lot of script and explore all the different topics that my audience might be interested in. They weren't in any kind of logical order, but I had built up a decent body of written content about my industry. They also weren't well written. I write my scripts like I talk, and I'm the only one who ever sees them, so they're far from perfect. As long as I can understand them, that's fine. So I had a lot of raw material to work with. I'm also in an education space where I try to help people learn about my industry. Not everybody likes to watch YouTube videos, so offering a book could potentially expand my audience. I'm in a thought leadership role where people follow me for my advice on a topic, and many, maybe all respected thought leaders in different niches have a book. It's part of their ecosystem of free or cheap content that gets people interested in what they speak about. Other things in that ecosystem might be a YouTube channel, a social media platform, a blog, or a podcast. When I buy a book now, it's usually because I've seen someone on YouTube or listened to them on a podcast interview. I'll do a deep dive and listen to all their best interviews and ultimately come to like them enough and respect their opinion enough to want to buy something from them. That could be a book or maybe a course too. All my favorite authors and thought leaders have been introduced to me through podcasts or YouTube, pretty much exclusively. Whether it's an interview with them or a creator that I already like has recommended the book. And the natural next step is to read that book, because a book is generally a more structured collection of that person's best advice and ideas, more than you can get from a 45-minute podcast interview. So writing a book is a great way to get your best ideas into an easy-to-consume format that your fans will want to buy and hopefully read. It also helps position you as an authority in your space. People see you've got a book and they think, okay, this person must know what they're talking about. That's not always actually true, because anyone can write a book, but not everyone can write a good book, and good books get recommended and spread through your industry. For me personally, I also saw a gap in the market. There are other career guides for artists which are good, but some of them are also quite old at this point, so there was an obvious space for me to fill with an up-to-date guide with my own unique angle on it. Ali Abdaal can write and sell a book on productivity because he's got 5 million YouTube subscribers, but an average Joe like me couldn't compete in that particular space because I've got no credibility and there's way too much competition. But in my niche, there was an obvious opportunity and I knew I could write something really useful. The second big question is, why self-publish? I didn't even try to get a proper publisher, partly because I knew I probably couldn't have got one because I'm a nobody. I don't have an enormous following online, I'm not a celebrity, and I don't have the same credibility that a PhD psychologist or an entrepreneur that's made millions of dollars does. I also didn't have any proof that I could write. I'm not really an interesting prospect to a good publisher. But it's also partly that I didn't see much value in it. Unless they think you're going to have a smash hit bestseller, publishers aren't pouring lots of money into marketing your book. You still have to do that part yourself if you want it to sell. If I'd have got a traditional publisher for my book, I might get 10% royalties, top end, on each copy sold. The paperback is $15.99 and I make about £6 for each book I sell from self-publishing. If it were through a publisher, I'd probably only make £1.50 for each book. The big benefit of a traditional publisher is their distribution though. In theory, your book could be sold in bookstores all around the world. And personally, I've found it absolutely impossible to get my book into big bookstores. Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, etc. just aren't interested in selling self-published books. It makes sense. They've got big deals with publishers to fill their shelves with books from the different top publishers. A self-published book is untested. Could be good, could be really, really bad. Why would they take a chance on a nobody first-time author? So, could I have sold more books by working with a traditional publisher? Probably yes, but with a niche interest topic like mine for illustrators, I'm not fooling myself to think that the book would be in every bookshop. Self-publishing makes sense for me. If you've got a lot of credibility and a big audience, or you're writing a book in a more mainstream genre, then traditional publishing is probably worth pursuing. Here's my first recommendation if you want to write a non-fiction book. This book, Write Useful Books, is just absolute gold. It's self-published too, and I came across the author, Rob Fitzpatrick, on a podcast, and I was really interested in his ideas and approach. I bought all 3 of his self-published books now. One is on testing new products, the other is on designing and hosting workshops. But Write Useful Books, as the title suggests, is all about writing a book that's genuinely useful to other people and something they will recommend to others. It talks about the pros of self-publishing, it helps you write a title and plan the structure, it also recommends testing all the ideas you write by teaching them first and getting feedback from beta readers throughout the process. It helps you do a pre-launch, the launch, and then ongoing marketing of the book. I really can't recommend it highly enough because it's absolute gold. If I hadn't read this book, I probably never would have written my own book. Other books I read while I was thinking about writing and during the writing process are How to Write Clearly by Tom Albrighton. This is another 5-star book on writing clearly, something that is very important for recommendable non-fiction. People read at different levels, so if you want people to understand what you've written, you've got to be clear. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, which is a brilliant book on writing and life too. Eats, Shoots and Leaves by Lynn Truss helped me get a better grasp on grammar and punctuation. Not that I'm an expert now, I probably went from a 1 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10. The Elements of Style by William Strunk Jr. and E.B. White is a classic in the writing niche, and On Writing Well by William Zinsser is another classic. There's another book on writing I want to recommend too, but I've only read it more recently. It's specifically about writing online for social media and LinkedIn and that kind of thing. It's a different beast than writing books. But if you're interested in that kind of writing to build an online audience, it's called The Art and Business of Online Writing by Nicholas Cole. I probably spent about £50 or £60 on books about writing through my writing journey. If you want to write a book, there's no shortcut to the writing process. It takes a long time. It's frustrating and it's hard to stay motivated, especially if you're not used to it, which I wasn't. It took me about 3 months to write the first draft of my book, which was about 40,000 words, and I was super disciplined. Then it took about 10 or 11 months to get the final version with the help of an editor. It was so difficult and so time-consuming. I mentioned Rob Fitzpatrick's book, Write Useful Books. That was the inspiration to start. Well, Rob also has an online community of authors who are also self-publishing their books. They have online group co-working sessions multiple times a week where authors can drop in, tell each other what they're working on, then write together for an hour and reflect on their process and problems at the end. Without those co-working sessions, I could not have stayed motivated. It was $29 a month, and it was the best investment I made in developing my own book. So worth it. I was part of that group for a year. That's $290, which is about £215. I wrote in the mornings for an hour or 90 minutes before work. I'd do another hour or 2 in the evenings and try to get one long session in at the weekends for about 4 hours. So I'd be writing or editing for between 18 and 20 hours a week for the best part of a year. For someone who's never written anything longer than a blog post, that is a big commitment. Eliminating distractions is essential for those writing sessions. No phone on the desk. I'd even sometimes listen to white noise to zone everything else out. If I'd allowed myself to get distracted while I was writing, it probably would have taken me 2 or 3 times as long to finish, and I might never have finished it. So the first step is getting all your ideas out of your head into a first draft. I had a rough order in my head, but it actually changed completely once I got into the editing process. I used Scrivener to write because I could reorganize things quite easily in there, and it's a nice distraction-free writing environment. But honestly, a Word document or Apple Notes would work just fine. In fact, I needed to transfer everything over to a Word document ultimately before I worked with my editor so she could mark things up, which was a bit of a frustrating process because I haven't used Word in about 20 years before that probably. Writing my book was the most focused I've ever been, and it needed me to be consistent and undistracted and to have some accountability from that writing group. I asked several of my Instagram followers to be beta readers to help me identify parts that were missing or to ask questions that I hadn't thought about, and I used helpthisbook.com to organise that feedback. It lets people read and annotate the different drafts that you put up there with their thoughts, bits they thought were confusing or slow or things they wanted expanding, and bits they really liked too. It was a really useful step to help me see what my target audience actually wanted. The next step is hiring a professional editor. I could have put out the first draft of the book because at the time I was pretty happy with it, but man, that would have been such a big mistake. Working with an editor transformed my book from a badly written jumble into a recommendable, truly useful guide for my audience. Readsy.com is an online marketplace for everything book related. You can hire editors, proofreaders, cover designers, layout designers, and illustrators all in one place. It's great. After a bit of searching, I found my wonderful editor, Lisa Cordaro, and we started working together. If you want your book to be the best it can be, and why wouldn't you? You need guidance and feedback from a professional editor. Lisa is an expert. I am not. At least half of the credit of my book being as good as it is goes to her. There's a link in the description to Lisa. She's great on LinkedIn too. I was pretty happy with my first draft. It was definitely the best thing I'd ever written. And I remember asking Lisa after she'd read it if she could give me a rating out of 10 to judge how much work it needed. She told me that was a stupid question. And I knew that she was a good fit for me because I needed someone to give it to me straight. We worked together for about 10 months and 8 or 9 revised versions. She would mark up each draft with recommendations, improvements to my sentences, and organisation of my paragraphs and sections. She helped me put the book into a logical order and fill in a lot of the gaps. She also helped me write in a more inclusive and, I guess, agreeable way. Without meaning to, a lot of what I was writing could have come off as patronising or maybe too aggressive or blunt. Like I said, I write like I talk most of the time, but she helped me see how things could be misinterpreted or rub people the wrong way. There's one other thing worth mentioning here because my first drafts had lots of quotes in from other books. Lots of books quote other authors, and so I naturally just added quite a lot in from my favourite books. But there are very strict and specific rules about what you can and can't quote from other authors. Because, of course, all those books are under copyright. And it's not just a case of asking the author for their permission, because if they've been traditionally published, the publisher may own the copyright to the text, which is another downside to traditional publishing. And there's a specific process you need to go through to get permission to quote authors in your own book. It's either by contacting publishers directly, or it's through this platform, which may only be for the UK, but it's called PLS Clear. You tell them about what you're writing and specify what you want to quote, and then apply for permission. I did this quite late in the editing process, but in the end, it took so long I would have had to delay the publishing date. So if you want to do that, start early. I was told that publishers have large legal departments and they're not afraid to use them. So if I wasn't willing to wait for permission, I should rewrite the quoted sections to paraphrase or to explain the idea in a different way. So I did that. There's only one direct quote in the book now, which is from this book, How to Take Smart Notes by Sonka Ahrens. It's self-published, so I simply just got in touch with the author and asked him directly. So Lisa helped me avoid potential legal issues too. Editing was the most expensive part of self-publishing and a part that a traditional publisher would cover. Editing the book cost about £8,000, which is a big investment, but it was an investment. I've made that back and more now through sales of the book. If you're a good writer, it probably wouldn't be that expensive, but I needed a lot of help. I could have skipped the editing step, but I definitely wouldn't have sold as many copies. My book will continue to earn money for me for years to come now because of this investment in professional editing. I hired a separate proofreader at the end just to find any final issues because it's good to get another pair of trained eyes on it. Because to be fair to Lisa, she'd been looking at the book for almost as long as I had, and she must have been pretty sick of me by the end of that grueling process of editing my amateur writing. Plus, I don't know enough about grammar or punctuation to spot those little errors. I hired my friend's mum for £300, and that was also a good investment because there were plenty of things she helped out with and spotted that I'd missed. So at the end of all that, I had my final written manuscript. And what would a book about illustration be without some illustrations? I hired my friend and colleague Michael Parkin to help me out with some fun illustrations for the book. Check him out, he's great. I'll put a link in the description. There are about 20 of them all in all, 1 or 2 in each chapter. Quite simple black and white illustrations, and thankfully Michael gave me mates rates. That was £2,000 all in. Now I had the writing and the pictures. This is where I needed to learn how to turn that into a legit book. Again, the Write Useful Books community had loads of resources on this, so that was really helpful. YouTube too, of course. The Kindlepreneur channel is great for self-publishers. Self-Publishing School and selfpublishing.com too, and basically anything I could find to help me figure out all the next steps. And there's quite a lot of steps. I started with what I knew best and what I was most excited about. I wanted a cover. To do that, I needed to decide what size the book was going to be. I used 2 platforms to print the book, and they are print on demand, so I don't have a big old stock of books lying around. It's Amazon and Ingram Spark, which used to be called Lightning Source. These both have specialist platforms for self-publishers to print books on demand. We'll get into them in a little bit more detail later, but basically I looked through the size options to figure out the best book size for the paperback and the hardback. I also looked at the books that I own to see which size I liked best, to hold, and I picked something appropriate. I hired Tom Etherington for the book cover. He's a fantastic book cover designer. I had a few ideas based on the principles that I'd learned from Write Useful Books. I knew I wanted something eye-catching and minimal so it would stand out on a bookstore shelf or an Amazon page. But basically, I trusted Tom to make something good. He's the expert, so I didn't give him a lot of feedback. He gave me a few rough concepts, and we narrowed it down to this pink pencil idea. It only needed a little bit of adjustment to reach the final version. So that was £1,250 plus £300 for the audiobook version, which came a little bit later. I could have got a book cover design for a lot cheaper, and many self-publishers choose to get a cheap cover. But the cover of a book is what gets people to pick it up, look at it, and ultimately buy it. Skimping on the design of a cover is a huge mistake. People judge books by their covers, even though they're not supposed to. And if you spent a couple of years of your life writing a great book, you don't want to slap some half-assed DIY cover on it. I wanted a pro designer, an expert, and I was willing to invest in that too to make my book the best it could be. And just like the editor, it's paid for itself and more. Tom did the front cover, and I figured I could lay out the text on the back and the spine myself. Which brings me on to the graphic design elements of the book. I did do the page layouts myself. I thought about hiring a designer to lay out the pages, but I wasn't a complete novice with InDesign, so I thought I'll just give it a go. And it was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. But I did it with the help of a class on Skillshare by Aaron Lindau, which breaks down pretty much everything you need step by step of the process of designing a book. It is really fiddly because if you make a change to page 30, that has a knock-on effect to page 130. It took me about a month to lay out the pages of the book, and I made a lot of time-wasting mistakes. I don't know how much a designer costs for the interior of a book, but I think we're probably looking at about £500, £600, depending on the size of the book and the complexity of the layout. Fiction is pretty straightforward, but mine has a lot of boxes and call-outs and images and things to factor in. If you're not familiar with InDesign, hiring a designer is probably a good investment. Once I'd sorted this out, I knew how many pages the book was going to be, so I could then figure out how wide the spine was going to be, and Lightning Source and Amazon both have tools to work this out, so it's super simple. You type in how many pages there is and what size the book is, and it works out the dimensions of the cover. I laid out the spine and the back cover of the book, and at that point I had all the physical elements I needed to publish it. The written text in the layout, plus the images, the PDF print files of the pages, and the PDF print files of the front and the back cover for the paperback and the hardback. There's 2 things left to add to the cover design, which is the barcode and the ISBN number. The barcode and the corresponding ISBN number are unique to each version of the book. So the paperback gets one, the hardback gets another. The ebook or Kindle version needs a separate ISBN number too, but it doesn't need a barcode because it's not a physical product, and that's the same for the audiobook. In the UK and Ireland, there's a specific agency for buying barcodes and ISBN numbers called Nielsen. I bought 2 barcodes for £30, one for the paperback, one for the hardback. ISBN numbers are sold separately. A single ISBN number costs £91, but I needed 4: paperback, hardback, audiobook and ebook. This may have changed now, but at the time they sold a pack of 10 ISBN numbers for £174. On the face of it, that's a pretty good bulk discount, but it seems like a very high price for what it is overall. And for me, most of that pack of 10 won't ever be used. I imagine that's the same for many authors who will only write a single book. Let's talk about formats for a second. If you write a book, you want people to read it. If you're going to go to all that effort, it doesn't make sense to just produce one format because people like books in different formats. So you might as well put in that extra bit of effort at the end to produce a paperback, a hardback, a Kindle ebook version, and an audiobook too. That means you've got something for everyone. For me, the paperback is the best seller by a long way. I don't sell nearly as many hardbacks, but it wasn't much effort to add that into the mix. And the people who prefer hardbacks buy the hardback. They might not have bought the paperback. The Kindle version is straightforward in a way, but it needed to be reformatted specifically for ebook readers. People can adjust the size of a font on a Kindle, so you can imagine that the layout would be all messed up if you just use the print version. There's a process to make that work for ebooks, and it's a bit more work in InDesign. Again, that Skillshare class breaks all that process down. Then the audiobook is a big effort. It was really difficult for me to get that done. I actually didn't do it until about 3 months after the print publishing date. Reading a whole book out loud, even if you wrote it, is pretty challenging, it turns out. I'll talk more about that part later. Another thing Nielsen do is to provide a service called the Title Editor platform and also their enhanced service. When you're ready to launch your book, you can sign up for Nielsen's Title Editor platform and input the information about your book, things like genre, age range, the physical size of it, the publication date, and an image of your cover. It's a central digital hub that pushes out all that data to online bookstores, Amazon listings, and other retailers. It's a really useful service. However, it's limited. You can't add a long description of your book, which is a crucial element if you want people to look at the page of a website and actually understand if the book is worth buying or not. You can only add that description if you pay for their enhanced service, which is £145 a year. It seems crazy not to allow people to add a description of their book to this service unless you pay for the enhanced version. It's just one more input box after all. Whatever, I got it and I wrote a nicely formatted book description with bullet points and paragraphs, kind of similar to what's on the back cover. Then I found out when the data was all pushed out to the online bookshops that it doesn't actually support any formatting. So I just ended up with one big block of text, ugly text on the Waterstones website and other places too. Apparently, at the time, the only way to format your book description with bullet points and paragraphs, etc., basic stuff, is to sign up for another service called the Onyx feed, which is another thing to pay for. I didn't do that in the end. I just made it work within an unformatted block of text. So annoying. And this is what a traditional publisher can sort out for you. This whole system isn't designed to support indie authors or make it easy for them. All these prices probably make sense at scale for a publisher, but I felt like I was being scammed at every stage of the process. So expensive for some really basic things. Overall, I spent £350 in the first year with Nielsen for some essential items, the ISBNs and the barcodes, and the enhanced service to send out a pretty inadequate book description to online retailers, and I pay £145 a year for the enhanced service so I can actually keep that description on the book pages. The process of getting this data out to all the different bookshops would be almost impossible for an individual. I mean, maybe actually impossible. It is a valuable service, and if they went about it in a different way, I probably would have been happy to pay Nielsen £350 for all this, but I wouldn't have come out of it feeling like I'd been shaken down. Let's talk about uploading and publishing through Amazon and Ingram Spark. Both platforms walk you through the process of uploading your pages as one file and your cover as another file too. They're both slightly different, but they're well-explained steps, so I won't get into the details here. There's plenty more thorough guides on YouTube than I could provide, but it's pretty straightforward, actually. They explain it really well. I had to go through a few rounds of ordering test copies just to make sure colours on the cover was right and making sure everything lined up, you know. Sometimes I just couldn't see it until I had the book in my hand, but it's a normal part of the process to test these things. I just thought I'd show you the difference in quality between Ingram Spark and Amazon. This is the Amazon paperback, this is the Ingram Spark paperback, and this hardback copy is Amazon. So I actually really like the hardback from Amazon. I prefer the hardback from Amazon than I do from Ingram Spark. I don't think I actually have a copy of the Ingram Spark hardback, but this is really nice finish. What can I say? The paper is a nice weight to it. It's kind of white paper. The paperback from Ingram Spark, I chose more of like a yellowy paper because I like the look of it a little bit more. And you can see the difference between the Amazon one here. The Amazon paper is a lot more white. I prefer the Ingram Spark paperback a lot more because they had a few more paper stock options for the cover, and this has got a nice satin finish to it, which feels really nice. The Amazon version, this is a test copy that I ordered. It's got this kind of glossy finish, which yeah, it's fine, but not really my vibe. I ordered 45 advance copies to give to friends, colleagues, and other people who I thought might give me a bit of free promotion online or maybe write me a review. And that was it. I set the publishing date when it would become available on Amazon. I did a big social media push to tell people about it, and that part was done. I definitely didn't do as big a launch as I could have. I probably should have started teasing the book online a couple of months before the publishing date to build up a bit more hype, but I think I probably let imposter syndrome get the better of me. Once you do publish a book in the UK, you have to send a copy to the British Library, by the way, for their archive. Post-launch, I set up Amazon ads to help with early sales. A brand new self-published book with no reviews won't naturally climb the Amazon rankings. It only does that if people buy it. I did a bit of promotion on my social media and YouTube, but Amazon ads are a good way to get the book at the top of searches. Basically, you add a list of keywords that are appropriate for the book that you've written, so when people type those phrases into Amazon, your book appears in the search and you pay for that. I was willing to lose a bit of money initially with advertising to get the book ranking and to see some early sales. Over time, you tweak which keywords are working well and actually getting you sales and which ones aren't. You could end up paying for a keyword that gets you lots of clicks, which you pay for, but don't actually result in a sale. So you have to keep an eye on it and edit the list and keep tweaking it so that you're only paying for the keywords that convert to sales. Now I've got a much shorter list of words that do get sales. For every pound I put in, it results in about £1.75 or £2 in sales. I'm sure a pro at Amazon ads could improve that ratio, but I'm not losing money. I spend about £45 on ads every month, and as a result, I make about £100 in sales. Check out this guy on YouTube for some more in-depth guides on Amazon ads. That's how I learned it. He's great, really explains it well. I'll put a link to him in the description. So once the book had been out for a couple of months and I'd had time to recover, I knew I needed to record the audiobook. I had a good microphone already and I built myself a DIY sound booth using some blankets and foam sound panels that I use for reducing the echo in my YouTube studio room. Basically, all I needed to do was sit down and record myself reading the book from my laptop. Well, somehow it took me 5 weeks. It's so difficult. It was for me anyway, and I couldn't do more than like 30 minutes at a time because my throat would get sore and my mind would turn to jelly and I'd start stumbling over my words. It's a simple thing to do, but I definitely didn't find it easy. Once it was done and recorded, with all my mistakes in and repeated takes, I just couldn't face the thought of spending another 20 plus hours listening to myself and editing the audio. So I hired an audio editor from Upwork. It cost me about £400 all in, but I was not happy with the results. There were so many errors in it at the end. We really had to go backwards and forwards multiple times, and I had to listen through the audiobook like 10 times. He was a good engineer, but I got the impression he was using some kind of voice recognition software to edit it rather than actually listening to it, and that meant it cut out all the obvious errors and ums and ahs. But if I repeated a sentence while I was recording it because it wasn't quite the right tone or delivery, but was still technically the right sentence from the PDF, the software didn't pick up on it. So there were loads of like repeated sentences. I might as well have done it myself, and 2 years on, there are loads of great AI tools that could do this really well. The platform to upload audiobooks to Audible is called ACX. It has some very specific guidelines for audio quality and volume and formats that you have to follow follow, but it's actually very simple to set up. I made one mistake here, which was just my own oversight. I uploaded the Chapter 5 audio file into the Chapter 5 space, but also into the Chapter 7 space. I didn't know about that until months later when a listener emailed me about it. So anyone who listened to it the first time around probably wondered what the hell was going on. It was an easy fix, but do double and triple check everything like that because it's very easy to do. So all in all, I spent, or should I say invested, about £12,000 in the book over the course of a year and a half. I definitely could have done it cheaper, but I'm lucky enough to have been able to afford it at the time, and I think I've probably only got one book in me, so I wanted it to be the best it could be. Not everyone can afford to do it the way I did it, and there are some expenses you can definitely minimize along the way. But every one of the freelancers I hired helped me make the book great. It took about a year for the book sales to recoup that investment, but now it's just ongoing profit every month. So, was it worth the stress, the money, and the commitment? Absolutely. I've got a book that people recommend. It's paid for itself, and it gives me a nice little bonus every month, and it's something I'm genuinely proud of. I get so much great feedback on the book to tell me how it's helped them, which is really rewarding. If you've made it this far in the video, I'd love to know what stage you're at with your book. Drop me a comment, and if you've got any questions about the process, I'll try to help out. And of course, if you want to check out my book, The Illustrator's Guide, I'll leave a link in the description. See you next time.